Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is David Spungin, founder and principal consultant with the Leader Growth Group. And my talk here today is about leading leaders. And specifically, what I want to talk to you about is about creating cultures of leadership that enable high performance in a business environment. Now, immediately, what you might say, well, of course, leadership has a lot to do with high performance. I intuitively get that. However, I want to stretch your thinking a little bit today about where that leadership should exist within your organization, where it should exist. And I'd like to start us off with a story. Everybody likes a good story, right? From my unusual background, from my military background, I want to kind of highlight a few key points here. I'm going to take you back to Baghdad, Iraq, August 2003. Okay? My unit was one of the first units on the ground. And from April through August, those first few months, there's really very little infrastructure in place to support us. So often, this group of cavalrymen and myself used to have to go down to downtown Baghdad and do resupply missions, routine resupply missions. We had some great local contacts that we made good contact with, good relationships. And we'd done this probably 50 times over 4 months. However, the story I'm about to get to, this day was going to be a little different. So I remember donning my Kevlar that day, my body armor, our additional ammunition, conducting our pre-combat checks within our convoy as we were getting ready to leave the gate. The heat was oppressive. Baghdad in August is about 120 degrees plus. Now, as I was about to leave the gate that day, I remember the gate guard, he stopped me and he said, "Hey, sir, before you leave, I have to brief you on something." And he held out a PowerPoint slide. And on that PowerPoint slide was an artillery shell buried in the ground with wires coming out of it. Now, we know today this is an IED, improvised explosive device. You've heard of them. They're the most deadly thing on the battlefield. Back then, that was brand new. We had never heard of them. And so he says, "Hey, watch out for this." That was the extent of my training. So off we go. And we go to Baghdad. We leave the base camp. We go downtown. Everything's going great. Everything's going really well. We meet up with our locals, do barter exchange. We buy a bunch of air conditioners, load them up on our Humvees and on our trucks. We're heading back home. Things are going well. About 2 to 3 miles from base camp, I remember distinctly a loud boom. And it knocked me forward. My Kevlar fell off, and we kind of rolled to the side of the road there. And immediately I remember thinking, oh, not good. That was probably one of those IEDs. So I picked up the radio, and I got on the radio with my guys, and they all came back. We're okay, we're okay. So then we picked our head up a little bit, and we looked around. And on the other side of the road was an American APC, an armored personnel carrier, that had been flipped over and it was burning. So immediately we had to do something. And I got on the ground with my team. We gathered together. I consulted with my non-commissioned officers, and we said, well, what are we going to do? We got to go help. But I do remember at the bottom of the PowerPoint slide one thing. Don't rush to an IED because there's usually 1 or 2 more waiting for you. But we had to do something. So we moved across the road. We stopped traffic. By the time we got there, they had pulled the guys out and it looked like they were going to be okay. They were banged up, but they were going to be okay. They were administering first aid to them. So I said, what next? What can we do now? And that's when I noticed about a couple hundred people, local nationals, coming out of their homes and their apartments, coming across the street, all wanting to see what was going on, crowding the space. So we said, okay, we've got to provide security here. We gathered the guys together. We made like a half moon with our backs to the road, 2 guys on each position, because we knew that whoever had triggered that IED was probably in that crowd and was dangerous. And that's when I realized I made a bad decision, or at least it was a very difficult situation to be in. Because we didn't speak the language and we were trying to move them back. They didn't speak our language and they were trying to move forward, and then tensions got high. And for the first time over there, I saw young privates scared, having to lift their weapon, and for the first time feeling like they might actually have to use it. Very intense time. But the non-commissioned officers and myself, we walked around, we calmed everybody down, we said, remember your mission, remember your task, remember what we're up to, our rules of engagement, etc. And we got control of the situation. And right as I got control of it, I recognized that there was an overpass right behind us. And if you know anything about military history, he who has the high ground wins. So immediately we had to break our team up, adapt, be resilient, and move guys to the far and near side to secure the bridge. We closed down the perimeter a little tighter. Now, 15 minutes later, it all went well. We had a unit come in, evacuate the guys out. We collapsed our perimeter, got on our trucks, and we went back home. It all went really, really well. And I offer to you, why was that so? We had no training in how to react to an IED. We had no training on how to do crowd control. Some might say, well, maybe other training fed into that, or maybe it was just dumb luck. Well, I offer to you that the reason we were successful that day is the same reason that all teams are successful. The key ingredient was leadership. And not just my leadership, distributed leadership. Leadership amongst all those NCOs and every soldier that was on the ground that day. So this is a story really about decisiveness, composure, resiliency, adaptability, communication, teamwork, selfless service, all these sorts of principles that lead to leadership. So ultimately, it's a story about how leadership delivers high performance. Now, none of us were divinely given the gift of leadership. We had it learned. We had learned leadership through the culture of the Army, where everyone is expected to be a leader. Where everyone's expected to be a leader. It's about two different models of leadership. Look in your own organization. Who's empowered to lead in your organization, in your culture? Is it more of a top-down approach, where there's a leadership team? Or is it more where there's still a hierarchy, there's still a pyramid in place, however, it's distributed, it's shared, and everyone is expected to be a leader? You see, most organizations are on this side. That's the reality of the workforce. For the last 100 years, this has been our reality. This is what we're comfortable with. And I offer to you, if you truly want to have a high-performance team and a high-performance culture of leadership, we have to shift. We have to redefine leadership a little bit, particularly in our modern workforce and the complexities that we're facing here today. Now, if it's about the culture, though, and it's about the culture that teaches us that leadership, what needs to be in that culture for that to happen? I'm going to offer to you, I'm going to give you 8 key distinguishing traits or behaviors or commonalities that I've seen within cultures of leadership. And the first is this: practicing self-awareness. So often what we're doing here today in our workforce is that we're promoting people on competency alone. And the farther we get away from the technical work, the more emotional intelligence becomes imperative. And the companies that recognize this and focus on it and make it a practice succeed. Particularly the baseline fundamental piece of that, which is building our self-awareness. The second piece, modeling the desired behavior. So this is the proverbial lead by example. We all heard that, right? But we're not just talking about it in cultures, we're actually doing it. And particularly at the top. A leader is always on a stage. And your behavior is teaching people things, particularly what will be tolerated and what won't be tolerated. Third one, I like to call this communicating with intent. With intent. So there's 3 parts to communicating with intent. What do we got to do? Why do we have to do it, which is the purpose? And then what right looks like in the end, which is the expectations or the standards. When people throughout your organization start to communicate in that way, intentfully and with intent, great things happen. The fourth one is empowering decision-making down to the lowest level. And we intuitively understand this. But why don't you do it? Because managers like to retain decision-making authority, because ultimately, when we're making decisions, we're exercising power. And so giving away that power is uncomfortable. However, when we do so, people feel ownership over their work, they're more engaged, they're more in control of their lives. We get better results. But if we do that, we have to have a culture of accountability as well. So if we're delegating decision-making and authority, we have to have a culture of accountability. And so a key distinction within cultures of leadership, though, is not just about holding other people accountable. When it's really done well, people accept personal accountability, particularly when things go wrong. They start with themselves first. Coaching. In cultures of leadership, there's a lot of coaching going on. What does that mean? So there's different types of conversations. There's mentoring conversations. There's coaching conversations. There's counseling. Coaching in particular, though, I'm talking about helping people to see their true potential. Everybody has self-limiting beliefs, and great coaches help people to move towards their full potential, and they use two levers: challenge and support. Challenge and support. That's good coaching done well. The seventh one, rewarding collaboration over competition. So the last 100 years, particularly, we've been performance-oriented cultures, mostly focused on competition. We feel that that's how we drive and motivate people. But in our modern complexity, the ambiguity, just like back in Iraq that we feel here today, the volatility, the complexity of your world now requires cross-functional teams, requires relationships, requires collaboration. And particularly, I'm talking about rewarding collaboration, not just talking about it. And the final point, so this is about servant leadership, placing the needs of others before self. So when people truly understand the value and the power behind this, and they buy into it, and they recognize that I need to constantly seek out the needs of my team, my peers, my direct reports, my supervisor, and take care of those needs, the irony is that people will start to bend over backwards to make you successful. And when that permeates a culture, great things happen, high performance happens. So really, in summary, we're talking about our current model here today is about a leader-follower type relationship. A leader-follower relationship. And it's worked up to this point. But if you truly want to take that next step to the next level, this isn't going to serve you anymore. We've got to move to this idea of a leader-to-leader relationship, where people at all levels of your organization see themselves as a leader, identify themselves as a leader. But we can't end there. Just identity alone isn't enough. We've got to give them the tools and the knowledge to be able to actually lead.